It was Halloween night in 2003, a chilly evening in the quiet town of Briarwood, where the streets were lined with jack-o'-lanterns, spiderwebs, and skeletons dangling from porch rafters. The air was thick with the scent of autumn leaves and bonfires as children darted through the streets, their costumes glowing under the streetlights. Among the revelers was Megan Holloway, an 18-year-old high school senior who had plans to attend a Halloween party at the edge of town with her closest friends. She had chosen a simple but elegant costume, a black cat, complete with sleek ears, a tail, and whiskers painted on her face. It was meant to be a night of harmless fun, a way to celebrate before the final stretch of high school and the looming decisions about college and the future. But that night would be the last time anyone ever saw Megan. Megan left her house just after sunset, texting her friends that she would meet them at the party, which was being held at an old farmhouse that had long been abandoned, but was popular for such gatherings. The house was perched on a hill overlooking a stretch of dense woods known as Black Hollow Forest, a place rich with local legends of hauntings and disappearances that stretched back over a century. Parents warned their children never to venture too deep into those woods, especially after dark. But that didn't stop curious teenagers from testing their bravery. Megan arrived at the party just before 9 p.m., according to her friends, and was seen chatting, laughing, and dancing throughout the night. Nothing seemed unusual, but around midnight, Megan stepped outside to make a phone call. Her friends saw her slip out the back door, waving casually as she did, her phone pressed to her ear. That was the last time she was seen. When she didn't return after an hour, her friends assumed she had gotten a ride home or wandered off to find a quieter spot. But by morning, when she didn't respond to any texts or calls, panic began to set in. Her parents, after realizing Megan had not come home, called the police, and soon search parties were organized. The farmhouse and its surrounding grounds were combed for any sign of her. Her car was still parked near the driveway, but there were no clues as to her whereabouts. Witnesses claimed they saw her walking toward the woods on the phone, but after that, the trail went cold. For days, the town buzzed with speculation and fear. The police interviewed dozens of partygoers, but no one had seen anything suspicious. Search teams scoured Black Hollow Forest, their dogs sniffing through the underbrush, helicopters hovering above. But the forest was vast, its dense trees and winding paths making it difficult to search thoroughly. After a week, no solid leads had emerged. Megan had vanished, leaving behind no trace but a few scattered footprints in the dirt near the tree line. As days turned into weeks, the investigation grew colder, and hope began to fade. That's when the strange occurrences began. 2 weeks after Megan's disappearance, a local hunter, familiar with the woods, claimed he saw a figure standing near the edge of the forest just after dusk. A girl, dressed in black, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. He called out to her, but she didn't respond. She simply stood there motionless, before turning and walking deeper into the woods. The man followed, but as he approached, the figure seemed to vanish into the shadows, leaving him with nothing but the sound of rustling leaves. More sightings followed. Residents near the forest reported seeing a young woman, her black costume tattered and dirt-streaked, wandering aimlessly through the woods at night. Some swore they heard her calling for help, her voice faint, carried by the wind. But every time someone tried to follow or investigate, she would disappear, as if swallowed by the darkness itself. The town was gripped by a growing sense of unease, rumors swirling that Megan hadn't just gotten lost, that something in the woods had taken her. The legends of Black Hollow Forest were well known among the older residents of Briarwood. Stories of people vanishing, never to be seen again, had been passed down for generations. Some said it was the spirits of those who had been wronged, people who had died unjustly and whose souls were trapped, wandering the woods, luring the living to join them. Others believed it was something darker, an ancient force that fed on the fear and desperation of those who strayed too far into the forest. Whatever the case, no one who disappeared in Black Hollow was ever found. As the anniversary of Megan's disappearance approached, the town held a candlelight vigil in her memory. Her parents, still clinging to the hope that she might return, had not given up the search. though the police had long since stopped actively investigating. At the vigil, a woman approached Megan's mother with a strange story. She claimed to be a medium and said that she had felt a strong presence near the woods, a restless spirit trying to communicate. She offered to conduct a seance to try to contact Megan, but the family, skeptical and heartbroken, declined. A few nights later, however, a group of Megan's friends, desperate for closure, decided to take matters into their own hands. Armed with flashlights and their cell phones, they ventured into Black Hollow Forest. They followed the path Megan was last seen walking, the cool autumn air pressing in around them. The deeper they went, the more the woods seemed to close in, the sounds of the night growing eerily silent. About a mile in, they stumbled upon something they hadn't expected, an old, crumbling cabin that wasn't marked on any map. Its roof sagged and the windows were boarded up, but one of the boards was loose, allowing a sliver of moonlight to shine inside. Cautiously, they approached. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay, the smell of mildew clinging to the walls. As they explored, one of the friends noticed a book lying on a small table in the center of the room. It was an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through it, they realized it wasn't just any journal, it was Megan's. Her handwriting, shaky but unmistakable, filled the pages. The entries described a terrifying ordeal, a strange force in the woods, pulling her deeper and deeper, her desperate attempts to find her way back, the sound of voices calling to her, but no one ever answering when she cried out for help. The final entry was dated the night she disappeared, and it ended abruptly. The ink smudged, as if she had been interrupted. Panicked, the friends fled the cabin, taking the journal with them. They turned it over to the police, but no new leads emerged from its contents. The cabin once found was never seen again, and the journal was the only piece of evidence ever recovered from Black Hollow Forest. To this day, Megan's disappearance remains one of Briarwood's most chilling mysteries. Every Halloween, her story resurfaces, with new sightings and eerie encounters reported by those brave enough to venture near the woods. Some say Megan's spirit still wanders Black Hollow, trapped between this world and the next, while others believe she was taken by something far more sinister. Whatever the truth, the town of Briarwood will never forget the Halloween night when Megan Holloway vanished, leaving behind only whispers in the trees and the cold, creeping dread that whatever took her still waits in the shadows. Perched atop Hawthorne Hill, Danvers State Hospital looms like a shadow over the town, its Gothic spires piercing the sky, a monument to forgotten horrors. Once a bustling psychiatric hospital, its history is marked by the tormented souls who passed through its doors. Built in 1878, Danvers State Hospital was considered a state-of-the-art facility for the mentally ill, but over the decades, the hospital's reputation descended into darkness. Tales of overcrowding, inhumane treatments, and the infamous lobotomies that took place within its walls painted a bleak picture of what was once known as the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. By the time it closed in 1992, the asylum was a shell of its former self, abandoned, decaying, and haunted by the memories of those who never left. But it wasn't just the dark history that made Danvers infamous. As soon as the hospital closed its doors, reports of strange occurrences began to surface. Urban explorers, thrill seekers, and paranormal investigators flocked to the crumbling structure, drawn by the rumors of ghostly apparitions, eerie voices, and unsettling phenomena. Some claimed they could hear the faint cries of former patients echoing through the empty corridors, while others spoke of cold spots, objects moving on their own, and a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. One group of friends, intrigued by the stories, decided to explore the asylum on a rainy October night. Sarah, Mike, Rachel, and Jason had grown up hearing tales of the haunted hospital, but none of them truly believed in ghosts. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and a digital recorder, they made their way to the hospital's main entrance, the rusted gates creaking as they pushed them open. The building seemed to breathe with its own life, the rain dripping from the roof, the wind howling through broken windows. As they entered, the stale air hit them, a smell of mold, decay, and something else, something they couldn't quite place. The interior was a labyrinth of crumbling walls, peeling paint, and shattered glass. Graffiti lined the walls, but the original architecture still held a certain eerie beauty. They moved cautiously through the halls, their footsteps echoing unnaturally in the silence. Sarah led the group, her camera recording everything as they explored room after room. Old treatment rooms with rusted gurneys, patient dormitories with metal bed frames covered in dust, and offices where records of forgotten lives were scattered across the floor. They found an old operating room where lobotomies had been performed, the metal tools still laid out as if the doctors had only just stepped away. But as they delved deeper into the asylum, strange things began to happen. It started small, faint whispers that seemed to drift through the hallways just beyond their hearing. Jason, always the skeptic, dismissed it as the wind, but Rachel, her nerves fraying, couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. They continued on, reaching the basement where the most disturbing treatments had been conducted. The air grew colder, and their breath came out in visible puffs. Sarah, now gripping her camera tightly, asked if anyone else felt the sudden drop in temperature. But before anyone could answer, the lights on their flashlights flickered. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind them, the sound reverberating through the empty halls. They spun around, flashlights darting back and forth, but there was no one there, just the shadows playing tricks on their minds. Mike, trying to keep the group calm, suggested they move on, but as they did, the whispers grew louder, almost as if someone, or something, was following them. It was then that Rachel froze in place, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The group stopped, straining to listen, and for a moment, the whispers seemed to morph into a low, rhythmic chanting, echoing off the walls. Without warning, the temperature plummeted even further, and they all felt it, a presence, heavy and oppressive, like a weight pressing down on their chests. Jason dropped the digital recorder in his panic, and as it hit the floor, it crackled to life, emitting a garbled, distorted voice that none of them could understand. Frantic, they picked it up, rewinding the tape, only to hear something chilling. "Get out." Terrified, they raced for the exit, their fear driving them through the darkened halls. But as they neared the front doors, Sarah stopped abruptly, gasping as her camera began to glitch. She looked down at the screen and saw what they had all feared, a figure, pale and gaunt, standing in the shadows just behind them, its hollow eyes staring directly at her through the lens. She screamed, dropping the camera as the figure seemed to step forward, but when they turned to look, there was no one there. Breathless and shaken, they burst through the front doors, into the rain-soaked night, leaving the hospital and whatever haunted its halls behind. They never returned, but the footage Sarah captured on her camera and the chilling voice recorded on the tape would serve as a reminder of their brush with the unknown. Danvers State Hospital had claimed countless lives, and it seemed the spirits of those who had suffered within its walls were still restless, bound to the asylum by the horrors they endured. To this day, the hospital remains one of the most haunted locations in the country, its eerie legacy of suffering and unexplained phenomena continuing to draw those brave or foolish enough to venture inside. But those who enter rarely leave without carrying a piece of its darkness with them, a chilling reminder that some places are never truly abandoned. Eastern State Penitentiary, a colossal stone fortress in the heart of Philadelphia, has long been considered one of the most haunted places in America. Built in 1829, the prison was designed to reform inmates through solitary confinement, a method that many believed led to madness rather than redemption. Its towering walls, cold, narrow cells, and endless corridors were a breeding ground for despair, and over the years, countless inmates met tragic fates within its confines. By the time the prison closed in 1971, the suffering that had taken place within its walls had imprinted itself deeply on the structure. But even after the last prisoner was transferred, Eastern State's halls remained anything but empty. Stories of shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and eerie apparitions became so frequent that paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and skeptics alike flocked to the abandoned penitentiary, hoping to catch a glimpse of its chilling past. One cold autumn evening, a small group of friends, Tara, Lucas, Emily, and Dan decided to explore the prison after hearing about its haunted reputation. They had all grown up hearing about Eastern State's sinister history, but none had ventured inside before. Armed with flashlights and a sense of curiosity, they bought tickets for one of the nighttime tours, which allowed guests to wander the empty halls under the cover of darkness. As they passed through the imposing front gates, a chill crept over them, as if the very air within the walls was thick with something unseen, something waiting. The tour guide, an older man with a gruff voice, led them through the crumbling cell blocks, recounting tales of infamous inmates like Al Capone and Willie Sutton, notorious criminals who had once called Eastern State home. But the most unsettling stories weren't about the living, they were about the dead. As the guide spoke, he mentioned the most infamous ghost of the penitentiary, a shadowy figure seen lurking in cell block 12. Countless visitors had reported seeing this dark form, always just at the edge of their vision, vanishing as soon as they turned to face it. Some claimed to hear footsteps echoing down the halls when no one was there, while others described the feeling of icy hands brushing against their skin. After the tour concluded, the group decided to break off from the main crowd and explore one of the more isolated wings on their own. Cell block 12 was high on their list. The guide's stories had spooked them, but they were determined to experience something for themselves. As they made their way through the maze-like hallways, the sound of their footsteps seemed to grow louder, echoing unnaturally in the silence. Every now and then they stopped to listen, convinced they heard something else. Faint whispers, a soft shuffle, or the distant clang of metal on metal. When they finally reached cell block 12, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the dim light from their flashlights barely cut through the oppressive darkness. The cells were tiny, little more than stone walls and iron bars, and each seemed to hold a sense of sorrow, as if the suffering of those once imprisoned had seeped into the very bricks. Lucas, the most skeptical of the group, peered into one of the cells and scoffed, dismissing the ghost stories as just that, stories. But as he turned to leave, he froze, his expression shifting from mockery to confusion. "Did anyone else hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The others stopped, straining their ears. At first, there was nothing but silence, the kind that made your ears ring. Then, faintly, a sound, like someone breathing heavily, close but unseen. Emily gasped, gripping Dan's arm. "What is that?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The breathing grew louder, more labored, as if coming from within one of the cells. They swept their flashlights back and forth, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a loud clanging sound echoed from further down the hall, as if something had struck the iron bars. The group jumped, their flashlights shaking as they tried to locate the source of the noise. Tara, feeling her heart race, stepped closer to one of the cells and aimed her light inside. At first, it looked like just another empty space, but then something moved, a shadow, darker than the already pitch-black cell, shifting in the corner. She stumbled back, her voice trembling. "There's something in there," she stammered, her eyes wide with fear. Lucas, determined to prove it was all in their heads, stepped closer. "It's just the light playing tricks," he said. But even his voice wavered as he approached the cell. As he leaned forward to get a better look, the shadow seemed to rise, its form indistinct but unmistakably human-like. For a moment, it stood there, looming, its head tilted as if watching them. Then, without warning, it rushed toward the bars, a cold gust of air hitting Lucas in the face. He stumbled backward, his bravado shattered. "Run!" Tara screamed, and the group didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted down the hall, their footsteps pounding against the stone floor, the air thick with dread. Behind them, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, following them. They didn't dare look back. When they finally burst through the front gates and into the safety of the streetlights, they were breathless, shaken, and pale. None of them spoke for a long moment, the fear still clinging to them like a cold sweat. Lucas, usually the one to laugh off anything supernatural, was the first to break the silence. "That wasn't the wind," he muttered, his voice hollow. In the weeks that followed, they shared their story with friends and family, but no one quite believed them. Yet the footage they captured on Tara's phone told a different story. In the grainy video, just before they fled, A shadowy figure could be seen, moving through the cell block, fading into the darkness. Eastern State Penitentiary had lived up to its reputation. The shadowy figure in cell block 12 was real, and it wasn't alone. The prison's dark past had left behind more than just crumbling walls. It had left behind the tortured souls of those who had never escaped, their suffering forever imprinted on the cold stone of Eastern State. The Mary Celeste, a merchant brigantine, sailed out of New York Harbor on November 7, 1872, bound for Genoa with a cargo of industrial alcohol. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 experienced sailors. By all accounts, it was supposed to be a routine voyage across the Atlantic. The ship was in good condition, the crew trustworthy, and Captain Briggs was known as a competent and level-headed mariner. Yet, less than a month later, the Mary Celeste would be found adrift in the middle of the ocean, completely abandoned. Her crew and passengers vanished without a trace. On December 5, 1872, the DEI Gracia, a British ship also sailing to Europe, spotted the Mary Celeste off the coast of the Azores. She was drifting aimlessly, her sails slightly tattered but still intact, her course seemingly erratic. The crew of the DEI Gracia hailed her, expecting some sign of life from those aboard, but there was no response. Captain David Morehouse of the DEI Gracia, a seasoned mariner and personal friend of Captain Briggs, grew concerned. The Mary Celeste seemed eerily still, not the chaotic wreckage one might expect after a storm or pirate attack, but something more unnatural. After hours of calling out and receiving no reply, Captain Morehouse decided to send a boarding party to investigate. As the men rowed toward the ghostly ship, they were struck by the unsettling silence that enveloped it. The Mary Celeste should have been bustling with activity, but all they could hear was the creaking of her timbers and the gentle slap of waves against her hull. Once they clambered aboard, the sense of wrongness deepened. The ship was completely deserted. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no signs of violence, and no indication of panic. The cargo of alcohol was untouched. The personal belongings of the crew remained in their quarters, and the ship's provisions were fully stocked. Even more baffling, the ship's lifeboat was missing, but there was no obvious reason why anyone would have abandoned the Mary Celeste. The captain's cabin was undisturbed, with Sarah Briggs sewing still on the bed, as if she had merely stepped away for a moment. Sophia's toys were neatly tucked in a corner, and the ship's logbook indicated that everything had been proceeding as planned up until 10 days earlier. The final entry, dated November 25th, made no mention of any problems, just a routine note about the ship's position. But now, with the entire crew vanished into thin air, it was as if they had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. As the boarding party explored the ship, they found more perplexing clues. The sails were damaged, but not in a way that suggested a violent storm had hit. The rigging was in poor condition, but the ship remained seaworthy. One of the pumps had been disassembled, though there was no reason for it to be in such a state. The captain's chronometer and sextant were also missing, as was the ship's lifeboat. But there were no obvious signs of why the crew would abandon ship in such haste, especially when the vessel itself was perfectly navigable. The mystery deepened further when they discovered the galley. A meal had been left half prepared, as if someone had intended to return and finish cooking, only to be interrupted. And yet, there was no one to return. Word of the Mary Celeste's abandonment spread like wildfire once the DEI Gracia brought the ship into Gibraltar. Theories swirled as to what could have driven the crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship. Some believed the crew had fallen victim to foul play, pirates, or mutiny, but the untouched cargo made this unlikely. Others suggested a freak accident, such as a seaquake or waterspout, which might have spooked the crew into abandoning ship in a panic. But why would experienced sailors, led by an even-tempered captain, flee when the ship showed no signs of distress? Some speculated that the crew had been poisoned by the alcohol vapors leaking from the cargo, inducing hallucinations that led to irrational fear. But still, no definitive evidence could explain their disappearance. As time passed, the mystery grew darker, and more supernatural theories began to emerge. Whispers of ghostly apparitions and cursed waters circulated among sailors. Some said the crew had been lured into the sea by malevolent spirits, or that they had encountered something unspeakable in the deep, something that left no trace but consumed their minds and souls. Others believed in more arcane explanations, that the ship had sailed into the Bermuda Triangle, where the laws of nature and time unraveled, causing the crew to vanish into another dimension. The Mary Celeste, now a ghost ship in every sense, became a symbol of the sea's unexplainable horrors, a vessel cursed to drift with the weight of its unsolved tragedy. Over the years, many ships have faced the relentless fury of the ocean, but few have captured the public imagination like the Mary Celeste. Her fate remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time. Even today, historians, maritime experts, and paranormal enthusiasts still pore over the details, trying to piece together what happened on that fateful voyage. But the answers remain elusive, as if the sea itself is guarding the secret of the Mary Celeste and her vanished crew, leaving only one unsettling truth. Sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are the ones we can never solve. In the quiet outskirts of a small town, not far from the dusty roads of a rural neighborhood, Ali sat alone in his home, scrolling through his phone. It was a cool October evening, just days before Halloween, a holiday that had gradually gained popularity in his region. Though not widely celebrated in Pakistan, the influence of Western traditions had begun to creep into the local culture, especially among the youth in bigger cities. As Ali sat in the dim glow of his living room, the familiar hum of the ceiling fan blending with the distant sounds of the night, he heard something that made him pause. A knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost timid, but persistent. Strange, he thought. It was late, and visitors at this hour were uncommon, especially in such a quiet area. His home stood on the edge of the village, where the fields stretched far and wide, and neighbors were spread thin. Cautiously, he approached the door, the hairs on the back of his neck prickling with unease. Something about the knock felt off, but curiosity got the better of him. Opening the door slightly, Ali was met with the sight of two children standing side by side. They were dressed oddly, their clothes simple yet outdated, as if plucked from another time. The boy and girl, no older than 8 or 9, stood motionless. The dim streetlight barely illuminated their faces, but what Ali could see unsettled him. Their skin was pale, almost luminescent in the darkness, and their expressions were strangely serene, yet void of the innocence typically found in children. Their mouths curled into slight smiles, but it did not reach their eyes. "Can we come in?" the girl asked, her voice melodic but eerily hollow. Ali squinted, trying to discern more about them. The boy stood still, his gaze fixed on Ali, his eyes unnaturally dark, as if they contained no whites. A chill coursed through Ali, a sense of foreboding that made him hesitate. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the words escaping his lips as if they were heavy with an unshakable dread. "They're just around the corner," the girl replied, her head tilted slightly as if she were studying him. "We need to come inside, it's cold out here." Ali's heart raced as he stood at the threshold, the door barely open, the night air thick with an unsettling tension. He glanced behind him, half expecting to see shadows creeping into his home, the familiar comfort of his surroundings suddenly feeling hostile. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice more forceful now, trying to sound authoritative, trying to shake the fear that gripped him. "But we're scared," the boy chimed in, his tone flat, devoid of any real emotion. "Please let us in." The way they spoke sent alarm bells ringing in Ali's mind. There was a strange familiarity in their request, something that felt almost rehearsed. The girl took a step closer, her smile widening, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too white against her pale skin. Ali's instincts screamed at him to close the door, to keep these children away from him. He took a deep breath and began to close the door, but the girl reached out and placed her hand on it, her touch ice cold. "Please, we really need to come inside," she urged, her voice taking on a slightly more urgent tone. "We can't come in unless you let us." At that moment, a cold breeze swept through the crack of the door, wrapping around Ali like a ghostly hand. The air turned frigid, and he could see his breath forming tiny clouds in the dim light. The children's eyes seemed to darken further, swirling like deep voids of shadow, and the atmosphere felt thick with an unnameable dread. Allie's mind raced with thoughts of the stories he had heard. Tales of black-eyed children, sinister beings that preyed on the unsuspecting, luring them in with innocent appearances, and then revealing their true, horrifying nature. He had dismissed them as urban legends, mere folklore designed to frighten. But now, standing before these two seemingly innocent children, he felt the weight of those stories crashing down on him. "I can't let you in," he stammered, forcing the words out against the rising tide of terror within him. "It's too late. You need to go home." The children's expressions shifted, the smiles fading into something more menacing. The girl's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with an unsettling intensity. "We won't hurt you. We just need to come in." Suddenly, the knocking began again, this time louder, more aggressive, echoing off the walls of his house. Panic surged through Allie as the reality of the situation set in. He slammed the door shut and locked it, his heart pounding as he leaned against it, gasping for breath. For a moment, all was quiet. The knocking ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness that enveloped the house. Allie's mind raced, grappling with fear and confusion. He hurried to the window and peeked through the curtains, his breath catching in his throat when he saw them standing there, unmoving, eyes fixated on his window. The shadows around them seemed to stretch and twist, contorting in ways that defied logic. As the night deepened, Allie tried to distract himself, locking all the doors and windows, his phone in hand, poised to call for help. But every time he glanced toward the door or the windows, he could feel their eyes on him, penetrating his very being. Hours passed, yet the children remained outside, unyielding, watching, waiting. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The children turned and walked away, moving in sync, their feet barely making a sound on the pavement. Ali felt a momentary rush of relief, but it was short-lived. As he peered outside, he realized they were not leaving, only retreating to the shadows at the edge of the yard, where darkness seemed to congeal into shapes, forming a swirling mist that danced and writhed. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, leaving nothing but an unsettling silence and an overwhelming sense of dread. Ali spent the rest of the night in a fitful sleep, the memory of their hollow eyes haunting his dreams. He awoke the next morning, the sun shining through the windows, illuminating the remnants of a peaceful world he no longer felt part of. In the days that followed, Ali tried to shake the feeling of paranoia, telling himself it was just a strange dream, a trick of the mind. But as Halloween approached, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He avoided answering his door, peeking through the curtains whenever he heard a knock, heart racing at the mere thought of those children returning. As October 31st drew near, he braced himself for the worst. The atmosphere felt heavy, and whispers among the neighbors began to circulate about strange occurrences in the area. Children had gone missing, shadows lurked in the corners of their vision, and stories of the black-eyed children resurfaced, sending shivers down spines. The entire neighborhood grew tense, with parents warning their kids to stay close, to never wander off alone, and to avoid answering the door to strangers. On Halloween night, Ali decided to stay indoors, curtains drawn, lights dimmed, and the television blasting to drown out the unsettling silence outside. The trick-or-treaters came and went, laughter and cheers filling the air, but he remained cocooned in his home, anxiety gnawing at his insides. Just as he thought he might finally feel safe, there came that familiar soft knock at the door, followed by a chorus of whispers, chilling and hollow, echoing through the night. "Let us in. We can't come in unless you invite us." He knew what they wanted. The stories warned of the consequences of rejecting them, the price to pay for denying entry. Ali held his breath, paralyzed with fear as the knocking escalated, turning frantic, desperate. "Please let us in," they cried, their voices blending into a haunting symphony of need. Unable to bear it any longer, Ali stumbled back, tears prickling his eyes. He knew what he had to do, but deep down, the instinct to protect himself surged. With a deep breath, he steeled himself and shouted, "Go away! I won't let you in!" Silence fell once more, but it was short-lived. The shadows outside shifted and coalesced, forming into dark shapes, and the air grew heavy with a malevolence that wrapped around him like a vice. Then came the laughter, soft, eerie, and echoing through the stillness. The world around him blurred, the walls of his house closing in as he realized there was nowhere to hide. The children's voices rang in his ears, their dark eyes etched into his memory forever. And as he stared into the depths of the shadows outside, he felt a chilling truth settle over him. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, it's not the silence that is most terrifying, but the knowledge that something is watching you, waiting for an invitation into your life, a way into your very soul. In the early 19th century, nestled in the rolling hills of Tennessee, the Bell family, John, his wife Lucy, and their children, settled in a small farmhouse near the banks of the Red River. Life was simple and tranquil, filled with the joys of farming and the laughter of children. However, as autumn descended upon their rural home in 1817, a sinister presence began to unfold, turning their peaceful existence into a chilling nightmare that would echo through history. The disturbances began innocuously, strange noises echoing through the night. At first, it was only the creaking of the old farmhouse, the rustling of leaves, or the occasional thud that would make the family pause and exchange puzzled glances. But soon the sounds escalated into more alarming occurrences. The children would wake up screaming, claiming that shadowy figures danced along the walls and whispers called their names. Lucy would hear footsteps pacing outside her door at odd hours, but upon investigating, she found nothing but the darkness of the night. John, a practical man, attempted to dismiss these disturbances as the result of overactive imaginations or the tricks of a tired mind. But as the nights grew longer and the peculiar events intensified, even he could no longer deny that something unexplainable was haunting their home. One fateful evening, as the family gathered around the fireplace, Lucy suddenly fell silent, her face paling as she looked toward the corner of the room. "Do you see that?" she whispered, pointing to a shadowy figure that seemed to materialize from the darkness. The figure flickered in and out of view, a swirling mist that pulsed with a life of its own. The family held their breath, eyes wide, as the apparition coalesced into a more recognizable form, a woman with long, flowing hair and a twisted smile that sent chills down their spines. This was no ordinary spirit. As the Bell family began to experience physical manifestations of the haunting, it became clear that they were dealing with something far more malevolent than they had anticipated. The spirit, later known as the Bell Witch, began to reveal her true nature through a series of bizarre and terrifying events. The family would hear unexplainable knocks on the walls and doors, disembodied voices that echoed through the halls, and the sounds of scratching as if claws were raking against the floorboards. These disturbances escalated rapidly, with the witch even physically attacking the family members. Lucy would feel an invisible force grip her throat, and her children would wake up with bruises as if someone had struck them in the night. It wasn't long before the whispers of the Bell Witch spread through the community, drawing the attention of curious neighbors and local residents who wanted to witness the supernatural for themselves. As tales of the haunting grew, people flocked to the Bell farm, eager to catch a glimpse of the spirit. Some came armed with skepticism, while others arrived with an unwavering belief in the supernatural. Among these was Andrew Jackson, a future president of the United States. Hearing the chilling accounts of the Bell Witch, Jackson decided to visit the farm, determined to confront the entity. However, when he and his entourage arrived, they were met with a terrifying experience. Their wagon jolted violently, as if an unseen force had grabbed hold, causing Jackson to curse and flee in terror. It was said that even he, a man known for his strength and bravery, was unnerved by the power of the spirit. As the days turned into weeks, the family grew increasingly desperate. John Bell, the patriarch, became a primary target of the witch's torment. The spirit would taunt him, whispering malevolent threats and cursing him with every passing night. His health began to deteriorate, and he suffered from violent fits, unable to escape the grip of the entity. One evening, during a particularly fierce episode, the family heard a voice that sent shivers down their spines. "I will have him," it hissed, echoing through the house, resonating with a power that made the air itself feel charged with malice. Despite their desperate attempts to rid themselves of the witch, including consulting local seers and attempting various folk remedies, the spirit's hold over the Bell family only grew stronger. She delighted in their fear, and with every passing day, John's condition worsened. On the evening of December 20th, 1820, the Bell family found John lifeless in his bed, an expression of sheer terror etched onto his face. The townspeople were shocked and horrified, speculating that the Bell Witch had indeed claimed his soul. News of his death spread like wildfire, and the Bell Witch became a household name, her legend woven into the very fabric of American folklore. After John's death, Lucy and the remaining Bell children struggled to find peace. They eventually left the farmhouse, seeking refuge elsewhere. However, the spirit of the Bell Witch refused to be forgotten. Reports of her ghostly presence persisted, with many claiming to hear her laughter echoing through the woods and seeing her spectral form roaming the fields. Local legends surrounding her story continued to grow, with some believing that she would return on Halloween night, seeking to settle old scores and haunt the descendants of the Bell family. In the years that followed, the Bell Witch became a symbol of fear and fascination, drawing countless visitors to the site of the original farmhouse. Campfires flickered to life as groups gathered to share their own encounters and explore the eerie landscape that had once been the home of the Bell family. Ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, and curious tourists arrived, hoping to encounter the spirit that had tormented the family for so long. The area became a hotspot for ghost tours, with stories of strange occurrences and unsettling experiences filling the air. As time went on, the tale of the Bell Witch took on a life of its own, morphing into various interpretations through books, movies, and local lore. Some retellings emphasized her vengeful spirit, while others painted her as a misunderstood entity seeking justice for the wrongs done to her. Regardless of the perspective, one truth remained. The Bell Witch was a haunting reminder of the darkness that could linger within even the most ordinary lives. The haunting became particularly popular around Halloween, when tales of ghosts and goblins danced on the lips of eager storytellers. Families gathered around fire pits, sharing the story of the Bell Witch, their voices filled with a mix of fear and fascination. As the sun set and shadows stretched across the landscape, the air thickened with anticipation, echoing the chilling events that had transpired so long ago. The Bell Witch's presence was felt in every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves, and every whisper of the wind. To this day, the legend of the Bell Witch endures, standing as one of America's most compelling and unsettling ghost stories. Her tale serves as a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that may dwell just beyond the veil of our reality, waiting to be uncovered or awakened. As Halloween approaches each year, the spirit of the Bell Witch lives on, inviting the brave and the curious to explore the dark corners of history where fear and intrigue intertwine, and where the line between the living and the dead blurs ever so slightly. The Bell family's tragic tale serves as a powerful reminder of the spectral forces that can haunt our lives, long after the last echoes of their stories have faded into the night. In the winter of 1949, a quiet suburban home in Cottage City, Maryland, became the stage for a series of unsettling events that would later inspire one of the most notorious horror films of all time, The Exorcist. This true story centers around a young boy known only by the pseudonym Roland Doe. As a child, Roland was a typical boy, but his life took a dark turn following the death of his beloved Aunt Harriet, who had introduced him to the spiritual world. In his grief, Roland turned to a Ouija board, hoping to communicate with her one last time. This innocent exploration into the unknown would soon unleash a nightmare that would grip not only his family, but the entire community. Strange occurrences began to plague the Doe household almost immediately after Roland started using the Ouija board. It began with soft noises, whispers echoing in the dark, the rustle of leaves, and peculiar scratching sounds that seemed to come from within the walls. Initially, his family dismissed these occurrences as figments of an overactive imagination, a natural reaction to grief. However, as the days passed, the disturbances escalated. Roland began to experience terrifying episodes that left his parents bewildered and concerned. Objects would move inexplicably, toys would be found in odd places, and strange markings appeared on the furniture. The situation took a more alarming turn one fateful night when Roland was discovered in his bed, convulsing and speaking in a voice that was undeniably not his own. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and he was surrounded by a chilling aura that left everyone in the room paralyzed with fear. His parents, desperate for answers, sought help from doctors and psychologists, but none could explain the bizarre behavior or the presence of an unseen force. Traditional medical diagnoses failed to account for the escalating phenomena, and Roland's once normal life spiraled into chaos. Frustrated and frightened, the Doe family eventually turned to the church for guidance. Local clergy were skeptical, but after witnessing Roland's disturbing behavior firsthand, they began to suspect that something far more sinister was at play. In an extraordinary move, the family received permission from the church to conduct an exorcism, an act that had not been performed in decades. This decision would lead to a series of harrowing and intense exorcism rituals that would capture the attention of the nation. Two Jesuit priests, Father Richard McCabe and Father William Bodern, were assigned to the case. They arrived at the Doe household with a mixture of hope and trepidation, prepared to confront the evil spirit that had taken possession of the young boy. As they began the exorcism, the atmosphere in the house thickened with tension. During the rituals, Roland exhibited a range of strange and violent behaviors. He would scream in languages he had never learned. His body would contort unnaturally, and the air in the room turned frigid, despite the summer heat outside. The priests, armed only with their faith and the rites of exorcism, faced a powerful adversary that seemed to delight in tormenting them. As the nights wore on, the exorcisms took a toll on everyone involved. Roland's demeanor would switch unpredictably from calm to fury, often lashing out at the priests with a ferocity that was deeply unsettling. During one session, he levitated off the bed, hovering several inches above the mattress, while the priests recited prayers and invoked the name of Jesus. In those moments, they felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on them, and the reality of the supernatural began to feel all too real. One of the most terrifying incidents occurred when Roland, during a particularly violent episode, broke free from his restraints and lunged at Father Bodern. The boy's eyes blazed with an unearthly light, and he let out a shriek that resonated with pure malice. As Father Bodern struggled to contain him, he felt an inexplicable force pushing him away, as if something ancient and powerful was determined to protect its hold on the child. The priest stood resolute, reciting scripture and calling upon the divine to expel the malevolent spirit. But the entity continued to fight back, its power palpable and terrifying. Finally, after weeks of relentless struggles, a breakthrough came. On one harrowing night, as the priests gathered around Roland for what they believed might be the final confrontation, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The boy's body, previously contorted and filled with rage, became still. A deep, eerie silence enveloped the room as Father Bodern invoked the name of Jesus Christ, commanding the spirit to reveal itself. In that moment, the tension broke, and Roland's face transformed from one of agony to a serene calm. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from him, and the room filled with a light that seemed to push back the shadows. The exorcism was deemed successful, and Roland Doe reportedly returned to a normal life, though he never spoke of the harrowing experiences that haunted him. His parents, relieved yet traumatized, chose to leave the past behind, moving away from Cottage City and the memories of the dark events that had unfolded within their home. The story of the possession and exorcism would eventually reach the ears of author William Peter Blatty, who would draw inspiration from these chilling events to pen The Exorcist, a novel that captivated readers and delved into the complexities of faith, good, and evil. When the film adaptation hit theaters in 1973, it shocked audiences and ignited debates about the existence of evil and the supernatural. Despite the passage of time, the case of Roland Doe continues to be shrouded in mystery and intrigue, drawing the attention of paranormal investigators, historians, and thrill-seekers alike. The true story behind The Exorcist serves as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The legacy of Roland's ordeal echoes through popular culture as discussions around demonic possession, faith, and the supernatural continue to resonate with audiences. The events of that fateful winter remain a chilling testament to the power of belief and the potential for evil to invade our world, reminding us that sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that blur the line between reality and fiction. As whispers of the past fade into silence, the shadows of the Doe family's experience linger, leaving us to ponder the unseen forces that may still exist, waiting in the dark. In the heart of New York lies the enchanting village of Sleepy Hollow, a place shrouded in both beauty and eerie legend. Though it is forever etched in literary history thanks to Washington Irving's 1820 tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the true origins of this haunting story delve deep into the rich tapestry of local folklore, colonial history, and the spectral tales that have echoed through the woods for centuries. Sleepy Hollow, originally known as Kakiate, has long been associated with the supernatural. Its rolling hills, dark forests, and the meandering Tarrytown Creek create a backdrop that feels as if it has been drawn from the pages of a ghostly narrative. The area was originally settled by the Dutch in the 17th century, and it is here that the seeds of Irving's legend were sown. The Dutch settlers brought with them their own folklore, and stories of headless specters and haunted locales became woven into the local fabric. Among these tales was that of the Headless Horseman, a ghostly figure said to roam the countryside, searching for his lost head. It was rumored that he was a Hessian soldier who had lost his head during the Revolutionary War, forever doomed to ride through the night in search of it, an image that would eventually take root in Irving's story. Irving's tale, while fictional, was heavily inspired by the local folklore he encountered during his visits to the Hudson Valley. The real Sleepy Hollow is a place steeped in history, where the spirits of the past seem to linger in the shadows. The village's dark history includes tales of colonial skirmishes and the impact of the Revolutionary War, which added a layer of depth to the already rich storytelling tradition of the area. The Hudson Valley was a battleground for both sides during the war, and many locals believed that the souls of those who fell in battle continued to haunt the hills, creating a tapestry of spectral lore that would inspire generations. The story's protagonist, Ichabod Crane, was portrayed as a superstitious schoolteacher with a penchant for the paranormal. His character, though fictional, embodies the fears and beliefs of a community that was deeply connected to its past and the legends that shaped it. In Sleepy Hollow, it was not uncommon for townsfolk to share ghost stories around flickering fires, recounting encounters with apparitions and the inexplicable. Irving's portrayal of Ichabod's fear of the Headless Horseman mirrors the anxieties of a society still grappling with the traumas of war and loss, making the story resonate on a deeper level. The story climaxes on a fateful Halloween night when Ichabod encounters the legendary Headless Horseman while crossing the dark haunted bridge that marks the boundary between the living and the dead. This pivotal moment is steeped in symbolism, representing not just a physical confrontation with the supernatural, but a deeper struggle with one's fears and the legacy of the past. The horseman's appearance, with his fiery eyes and ghastly silhouette, serves as a manifestation of the nightmares that haunt the village, encapsulating the lingering effects of the collective trauma experienced by its residents. Today, Sleepy Hollow attracts visitors from all over the world who come to explore the charming streets, historic sites, and the ethereal landscape that inspired Irving's haunting tale. The village has embraced its ghostly heritage, hosting annual events like the Great Jack-O-Lantern Blaze and the Sleepy Hollow Haunted Hayride, which celebrate the darker aspects of its history while inviting new generations to engage with the legends. The old Dutch church, where the story's characters come to life, still stands as a reminder of the town's past, and the adjacent cemetery is the final resting place for many of the area's early settlers, further adding to the sense of mystery that envelops the region. Yet, as night falls and the shadows stretch across the land, the legend of the Headless Horseman lives on, continuing to inspire tales of terror and fascination. Locals still share stories of ghostly sightings, whispering winds, and the feeling of being watched as they walk through the dense woods, particularly during the Halloween season. Sleepy Hollow remains a testament to the power of storytelling and the connection between place and narrative, where the line between reality and legend blurs beneath the silvery glow of the moon. As you wander through the picturesque village, the echoes of Irving's tale seem to resonate in the air, reminding us that the true power of legend lies not just in the stories themselves, but in the haunting memories and histories they represent. In Sleepy Hollow, the past and present converge, creating an atmosphere charged with mystery, magic, and the ghosts of those who came before. Whether one believes in the supernatural or not, the legends of Sleepy Hollow are woven into the very fabric of its identity, inviting all who visit to ponder the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, reality from fiction, and fear from the unknown. On a cold and starry Christmas Eve in 1945, the Sodder family gathered in their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, for a festive celebration. George and Jenny Sodder, parents to 10 children, transformed their modest abode into a warm haven of holiday cheer. The aroma of a lavish holiday feast filled the air, laughter resonated throughout the house, and the flickering lights on the Christmas tree created a magical atmosphere. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the children, ages 5 to 14, were given the rare privilege of staying up late to enjoy the festivities. They played games, opened presents, and basked in the warmth of family love, unaware that their joyous night would soon spiral into a chilling nightmare. As the evening wore on, Jenny, who was in the kitchen cleaning up after the festivities, noticed the sounds of laughter and revelry were slowly fading. When she stepped outside to check on her children, she was met with an ominous sight. Their home was engulfed in flames, a raging inferno that illuminated the night sky and sent plumes of smoke curling into the air. Panic surged through her as she realized her 5 youngest children, Marion, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, and the twins, Eddie and Sylvia, just 5, were still inside. Jenny rushed to wake George, who was already outside, frozen in disbelief at the sight before them. They sprinted toward the blazing house, desperately calling out their children's names. But the inferno roared back, consuming everything in its path. The flames danced and crackled, as if mocking their futile attempts to save their family. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the horror unfolding before their eyes, and amidst the chaos, George raced to the car, intending to drive to the nearest phone to call for help. However, they soon discovered that the car would not start, adding another layer of despair to their already dire situation. As the fire raged on, the couple's heart-wrenching screams filled the night, but the fire department took what felt like an eternity to arrive. When they finally did, it was too late. The Sodder home was reduced to charred rubble, and the firefighters could only watch in grim resignation as the last remnants of their dreams went up in smoke. In the aftermath, investigators scoured the debris for any sign of the missing children. As they sifted through the ashes, a grim realization began to take shape. There were no remains to be found. This inexplicable fact sent shockwaves through the community and left George and Jenny reeling with confusion and anguish. Authorities concluded that the children had likely perished in the fire, their bodies consumed by the flames. However, George and Jenny could not accept this devastating narrative. The lack of remains fueled their conviction that their children might still be alive. Why hadn't they found anything? How could 5 children simply vanish without a trace? This question gnawed at them, igniting a relentless quest for answers. Their anguish morphed into determination, and they began to search for clues that might explain the horrifying events of that night. As time passed, more accounts emerged from neighbors and friends, detailing strange happenings leading up to the fire. Some claimed they had seen a group of suspicious men loitering near the Sodder home just before the blaze erupted, whispering furtively in the shadows. Others reported witnessing a man trying to tamper with the family's vehicles that evening. The mysterious events surrounding the fire intensified their suspicions. Adding to the unsettling mystery, George discovered that the phone lines had been mysteriously cut, isolating the family from the outside world at the moment they needed help the most. Determined to uncover the truth, George and Jenny delved deeper into the investigation. They printed flyers with their children's photos and distributed them throughout the community, imploring anyone with information to come forward. They hired private investigators and chased down leads, fueled by a burning desire to find their missing children. Each tip and sighting they received sent them on wild goose chases, and while the details varied widely, they all carried the same chilling implication. The children might still be out there, somewhere. The Sodder family's plight captured national attention, and their story became a sensation in the media. Newspapers across the country ran articles detailing the tragedy, and the public was captivated by the mystery. Some theorized that the children had been abducted by human traffickers, while others speculated they had run away and were living under new identities. The conjectures seemed endless, but each theory led to dead ends, leaving George and Jenny grappling with their grief and frustration. In a twist that would deepen the mystery, the couple began receiving strange letters from unknown sources. One letter, postmarked from Central City, Kentucky, included a photograph of a young man who bore an uncanny resemblance to one of their missing children, Louis. The letter hinted that he was alive, igniting a flicker of hope in George and Jenny. They pursued every lead, traveling to Kentucky in search of their son, only to discover that it was a false lead, and their hopes were dashed once again. As the years rolled on, the couple's determination never waned, even as the pain of their loss became a part of their daily lives. They continued to pursue every lead, every strange phone call, and every odd tip that came their way. The passing of time did little to ease their hearts. Instead, it fueled their quest for truth and justice. In a desperate bid to keep the memory of their children alive, George and Jenny erected a billboard along Route 16, depicting their children's images and urging anyone with information to come forward. This billboard became a local landmark, drawing the attention of travelers and passers-by for decades. Despite the couple's relentless search, the case grew cold, and as the years turned into decades, the mystery of the Sodder children's disappearance remained unresolved. The couple's hope slowly turned into obsession, and they refused to abandon their search for answers. George passed away in 1969, but Jenny continued to uphold their legacy, determined to keep the story alive in the hearts of those who might help uncover the truth. She would sit by the billboard, often talking to passers-by, sharing her story in the hopes that someone might remember something, anything that could help. In 1989, Jenny joined George in death, leaving behind a haunting legacy filled with unanswered questions. Their lives were forever marked by the tragedy that unfolded that fateful Christmas Eve, a testament to the love of parents who refused to give up on their children. To this day, the mystery of the Sodder children remains one of America's most enduring unsolved cases, captivating the imagination and hearts of those who hear their story. Visitors to Fayetteville often speak of the tragedy, and the site where the family's home once stood has become a place of reflection and curiosity. Some locals claim to have witnessed strange lights in the woods near the remains of the family's home, fueling speculation that the children may have escaped the fire and are still out there, hidden in plain sight. The haunting tale of the Sodder children serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the mysteries that can shroud our understanding of reality. Their disappearance continues to captivate the imagination, leaving behind an enduring legacy of love, loss, and the quest for answers that transcends time. The tragic events of that Christmas Eve remain forever etched in history, a somber echo of hope that perhaps one day the truth will finally come to light. In the heart of Key West, Florida, amidst its vibrant streets and tropical allure, lies a tale shrouded in mystery and dread, the legend of Robert the Doll. This seemingly innocent artifact, a doll dressed in a sailor suit with button eyes and a mischievous grin, is more than just a peculiar relic. It is the epicenter of unsettling stories that echo through the ages. The tale begins in the early 1900s when a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto, affectionately called Gene, received the doll as a gift from his grandfather, who had traveled to Germany. The moment Robert came into Gene's possession, the atmosphere around the Otto household shifted, and a series of bizarre occurrences began to unfold. casting a long shadow over the family's lives. Jean, an imaginative child, quickly became inseparable from Robert, treating him as both a friend and confidant. He would take the doll everywhere, introducing it as if it were a living entity, and they spent countless hours together, immersed in play. But soon, the innocent companionship began to turn sinister. Family members started to hear Jean speaking in hushed tones to Robert, often laughing and responding as if the doll were conversing back. The laughter, however, was unsettling, an eerie sound that sent shivers down the spines of his parents. They dismissed their unease as overactive imaginations, but the strangeness didn't stop there. As days turned into weeks, peculiar events escalated. Neighbors reported seeing the doll moving in the windows of the Otto house, often appearing in different positions than where it had been left. Jean's parents would find him locked in a room with Robert, claiming that the doll had moved on its own, whispering secrets that only he could hear. Items began to go missing from the household: keys, toys, and even family heirlooms. When searched for, these objects would often turn up in the strangest of places, as if Robert had a hand in their disappearance. Jean's parents could hardly comprehend the bizarre behavior. They feared their son was becoming too entwined with the doll's ominous influence. As Jean grew older, so did the rumors surrounding Robert. The tales of the doll's uncanny abilities spread throughout the town, and people began to view him with suspicion and fear. Local kids dared one another to sneak into the Otto home and touch Robert, but few were brave enough to follow through. Those who did often reported a deep sense of foreboding, claiming they felt an unshakable chill upon entering the room where the doll resided. When Jean moved away from home, Robert was left behind in the attic, but the tales did not end with the boy's departure. Years later, Jean returned to Key West as an adult, bringing Robert back into his life. The doll was placed on display in a glass case in the family's home, which had since transformed into a museum dedicated to the strange artifact. As visitors flocked to see Robert, the doll's reputation for causing bad luck grew. Stories circulated of those who dared to insult or disrespect him, cursed with a string of misfortunes that seemed to follow them like a shadow. A group of tourists once visited the museum, chuckling at the absurdity of the tales. They snapped pictures of the doll without asking for permission, their laughter echoing in the otherwise quiet room. But as they left the museum, their luck took a dramatic turn. One woman slipped and fell, injuring her ankle. Another's car broke down just blocks away, forcing them to wait for hours for a tow truck. Many guests have since reported experiencing strange phenomena when in the presence of Robert. Some have claimed to hear soft giggles, while others have felt sudden temperature drops in the room. Staff members often recount eerie encounters, noting how Robert appears to shift slightly within his glass prison, as if aware of the people around him. There have been instances where visitors have left the museum, only to find their cameras inexplicably malfunctioning, photos turning out blank or distorted, as if the very presence of Robert interfered with reality itself. The media soon caught wind of the eerie tales surrounding the doll, amplifying Robert's notoriety and drawing even more curious visitors to the museum. One particularly chilling account involves a couple who dismissed the stories surrounding Robert as mere superstition. They made a point of mocking the doll while visiting the museum, taunting him as they posed for pictures. Afterward, they returned to their hotel, where a series of disturbing events began to unfold. They reported hearing unexplained knocks on their door throughout the night, followed by a chilling sense of being watched. The next day, while driving back home, their car was involved in a minor accident, leading to a series of inconveniences that seemed to plague them for weeks. In time, they came to believe that their misfortunes were linked directly to their disrespect toward Robert. Despite these warnings, some dared to approach the doll with bravado. A group of paranormal investigators set out to document their findings, armed with cameras and recording equipment. They challenged Robert, urging him to reveal his true power. What they discovered was nothing short of terrifying. During their investigation, they captured disembodied voices on tape, chilling whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The investigators reported feeling an overwhelming presence, as if they were not alone in the room. Some claimed to have seen Robert's expression change, his grin transforming into something more sinister, before their eyes, sending them fleeing from the museum in terror. Throughout the years, Robert the Doll has remained a figure of intrigue and horror, serving as a reminder of the unknown forces that may lurk within objects we deem ordinary. The museum continues to draw in thrill seekers and believers alike, each hoping to glimpse the enigmatic doll and perhaps even communicate with whatever spirit may reside within him. As the sun sets on Key West, casting long shadows across the town, the legend of Robert lives on, whispered among locals and travelers, a haunting reminder that some toys are better left untouched. Even today, Robert sits quietly in his glass case, observing the world with his button eyes, waiting for the next curious soul to approach. Visitors are warned to ask for permission before taking photos and to treat the doll with respect. Those who heed the warnings may leave the museum unscathed, but for those who scoff at the legend, Robert's curse lingers like a dark cloud, waiting to unleash a storm of misfortune that can change the course of their lives forever. The true nature of Robert the Doll remains a mystery, but one thing is certain: those who dare to disrespect him do so at their own peril. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.